Elvis was halfway through "Can't Help Falling in Love" when he noticed an elderly couple slow dancing in the aisle. What he did next stopped the entire concert and left 15,000 people in tears. It was August 19th, 1977, just 11 days before Elvis would die. The concert was at the Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, Indiana, and nobody in that building knew they were witnessing one of Elvis's final performances. Elvis was struggling that night. His health was deteriorating rapidly. The prescription medications he'd been taking for years were catching up with him. His breathing was labored, his movements slower than they used to be. But he'd never canceled a show, and he wasn't about to start now. The arena was packed with 15,000 fans, most of them middle-aged couples who'd grown up with Elvis's music. These weren't screaming teenagers anymore. These were people who'd fallen in love to his songs, gotten married to his melodies, and raised their children with his voice playing in the background. As Elvis began the opening notes of "Can't Help Falling in Love," the crowd settled into that familiar, comfortable feeling. This song had become a ritual at Elvis concerts, the moment when everything slowed down, when the energy shifted from excitement to intimacy. That's when Elvis saw them. In the middle section, about 20 rows back, an elderly couple had stood up from their seats. The man, who looked to be in his late 70s, was holding his wife gently, one hand on her waist, the other clasping her hand. They were slow dancing in the aisle, completely lost in the music, completely lost in each other. Elvis's voice caught for just a moment as he watched them. There was something about the way they moved together, the decades of love evident in every small gesture, that hit him harder than anything had in years. Elvis stopped singing. The band, confused, continued playing for a few measures before gradually trailing off. The entire arena fell silent, 15,000 people suddenly aware that something unexpected was happening. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elvis said into his microphone, his voice thick with emotion, "I need you to see something." He pointed toward the elderly couple, who had stopped dancing and were now looking around in embarrassment, realizing the music had stopped. "Sir, ma'am," Elvis called out, "don't stop, please, keep dancing." A spotlight operator, understanding what Elvis wanted, swung a soft spotlight onto the couple. They stood frozen, unsure what to do. "What's your name, sir?" Elvis asked gently. The elderly man cleared his throat. His voice was shaky but carried through the silence. "Robert. Robert and Helen Carter." "How long have you been married, Robert?" 56 years this September." A ripple of applause went through the crowd, but Elvis held up his hand for silence. 56 years, Elvis repeated softly. "That's longer than I've been alive. Can you tell me something, Robert? Is this your song? Is this you and Helen's song?" Robert nodded, and even from the stage, Elvis could see the man's eyes were glistening with tears. "Yes, sir. You sang it at our wedding reception." "Well, the record did. We couldn't afford to have you there in person." The crowd laughed gently, lovingly. "What year was that?" Elvis asked. 1965, Robert said. "We were married on September 12th, 1965, in a little church in Fort Wayne. The reception was in my father-in-law's barn. We had a record player set up in the hayloft, and when it came time for our first dance, Helen chose this song." Elvis felt his throat tighten. 1965. He'd been at the peak of his movie career then, churning out films, losing touch with what had made him fall in love with music in the first place. He'd felt like a manufactured product, not an artist. The idea that his music was the soundtrack to real people's real lives, real love, real moments, had seemed distant and abstract. But here, in front of him, was proof. Real love, still dancing to his song 56 years later. "Helen," Elvis said, addressing the woman directly, "may I ask you something personal?" Helen, a tiny woman with silver hair and a gentle smile, nodded. "Why this song? Out of all the songs in the world, why did you choose 'Can't Help Falling in Love' for your first dance?" Helen's voice was soft but clear. "Because that's exactly how I felt about Robert. I couldn't help it. Falling in love with him wasn't a choice. It was as natural as breathing. And your voice, Mr. Presley, captured that feeling perfectly. When I hear this song, I'm 21 years old again, dancing in my wedding dress, knowing I've found the person I want to spend my entire life with. The arena was completely silent. Even the toughest, most stoic men in the audience were wiping their eyes. Elvis set down his microphone and walked to the edge of the stage. His band and backup singers watched, unsure what he was planning. "I want to do something I've never done in 30 years of performing," Elvis said. "With your permission, Robert and Helen, I'd like to come down there and sing this song for you. Not for 15,000 people. Just for you two." What happened next had never occurred in Elvis's entire career. He walked down the stairs at the side of the stage, through the security barrier, and made his way through the crowd toward Robert and Helen Carter. The audience parted respectfully, creating a path for the king of rock and roll as he walked through them like an ordinary man. When Elvis reached the elderly couple, he was breathing heavily from the exertion. His health was so poor that even this short walk had winded him, but he smiled warmly at Robert and Helen. "May I?" Elvis asked, gesturing to the space around them. Robert and Helen nodded, both of them crying now. Elvis turned back toward the stage and made a gesture to his band. The music started again, soft and gentle, and Elvis, standing in the middle of the aisle, surrounded by ordinary people, began to sing "Can't Help Falling in Love" a cappella, letting the band provide only the softest accompaniment. But he wasn't performing, he was witnessing. As he sang, Robert and Helen began to dance again. Slowly, carefully, the movements of two people who danced together for more than half a century. Every step perfectly synchronized, every turn anticipated before it happened. Elvis sang directly to them, and something profound happened. The barriers between performer and audience, between celebrity and ordinary people, between the icon and the human being, all dissolved. Wise men say, "Only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you." As Elvis sang, other couples in the arena began to stand. Husbands reached for their wives' hands. Partners pulled each other close. Within moments, hundreds of couples throughout the arena were slow dancing, creating a sea of gentle movement and quiet intimacy. Elvis's voice cracked with emotion as he continued singing. He was thinking about his own failed marriage to Priscilla, about his daughter Lisa Marie, about all the relationships his fame and addiction had destroyed. He was thinking about how he'd spent his entire life performing for crowds, but had never really learned how to be intimate with one person. Here, in front of him, was what he'd been searching for his entire life: simple, enduring, real love. When Elvis reached the final verse, his voice was barely above a whisper, but in the hushed arena, every word carried. "Take my hand, take my whole life too, for I can't help falling in love with you." As the song ended, Elvis embraced both Robert and Helen. The three of them stood there, crying together, while 15,000 people watched in reverent silence. "Thank you," Elvis whispered to them, quietly enough that no microphone could pick it up. "Thank you for showing me what my music means. Thank you for reminding me why I do this." Robert gripped Elvis's hand firmly. "No, sir, thank you. You've been the soundtrack to our entire lives. Every anniversary, every difficult moment, every celebration, your voice has been there." Elvis made his way back to the stage, and the audience gave him a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. But they weren't applauding the performance. They were applauding the moment, the vulnerability, the humanity. After the concert, Elvis did something he'd never done before. He asked his security team to find Robert and Helen Carter and bring them backstage. In his dressing room, away from the crowd and the cameras, Elvis spent an hour talking with the elderly couple. They shared stories about their life together. Robert had been a factory worker. Helen had been a school teacher. They'd raised 4 children, weathered financial hardships, health scares, the normal trials of a long marriage. "What's the secret?" Elvis asked them. "How do you stay in love for 56 years? Helen smiled and looked at Robert with the same tenderness she'd shown him on the dance floor. "There is no secret, Mr. Presley. Love isn't a feeling that just stays the same forever. It changes. Sometimes it's passionate, sometimes it's comfortable. Sometimes it's just commitment when the feelings aren't strong. But you choose it every day. That's all. Robert added, and you have to really see each other, not who you want the other person to be, not who they used to be, who they are right now, today, with all their flaws and all their beauty. That's who you choose to love. Elvis felt like he was learning something essential, something that had eluded him his entire life despite all his fame and success. Before they left, Elvis gave Helen his scarf from that night's performance and signed a photograph for them. But more than that, he made them promise to send him an invitation to their 60th anniversary party just 4 years away. "I'll be there," Elvis promised. "I don't care what I'm doing. I'll be there to see you two dance again." Robert and Helen smiled, but they could see Elvis wasn't well. They could see the pain in his eyes, the exhaustion in his movements. "Mr. Presley," Helen said gently, taking his hand, "whatever you're struggling with, whatever burden you're carrying, please know that you've made the world so much more beautiful. You've given people like us the soundtrack to our love story. That matters. You matter." Elvis broke down and cried in a way his security team had rarely seen. These weren't tears of sadness exactly. They were tears of someone finally understanding the true value of what they'd created. 11 days later, Elvis Presley died at Graceland. Robert and Helen Carter attended a memorial service in Indianapolis, along with thousands of other fans. But they also held their own private ceremony, dancing to "Can't Help Falling in Love" in their living room, honoring the man who'd been part of their love story for more than half a century. When Helen Carter passed away in 1994, 17 years after Elvis, Robert played "Can't Help Falling in Love" at her funeral. And he told everyone there about the night Elvis Presley stopped his concert to watch them dance. "He gave us a moment we'll never forget," Robert said through his tears. "He made us feel like our simple, ordinary love was something sacred, something worth celebrating in front of 15,000 people." Robert lived until 2001, and according to his children, he played that Elvis song every single day for the 24 years he lived without Helen. On the anniversary of that Indianapolis concert every August 19th, he would stand in his living room and dance alone, remembering. The story of Elvis and the elderly couple who slow danced in the aisle became legendary among Elvis fans. Bootleg recordings of that concert are treasured not for the musical performance, but for the moment when Elvis stepped down from his pedestal and became simply a man bearing witness to love. "That night in Indianapolis," said Charlie Hodge, Elvis's longtime friend and guitarist, "I think Elvis finally understood what his music had done for people. It wasn't about the gold records or the sold-out shows. It was about giving people the words and melodies for their most intimate moments, their first kiss, their wedding day, their anniversaries, their quiet dances in the kitchen. That's the real legacy." Today, "Can't Help Falling in Love" remains one of the most popular wedding songs in history. Millions of couples have chosen it for their first dance, unaware of the August night when Elvis stopped everything to honor one couple's 56-year love story. The Market Square Arena where it happened was demolished in 2001, but there's a small plaque on the site that reads, "Here, Elvis Presley reminded us that the greatest performance is simply being present for each other's love." The story of Elvis and Robert and Helen Carter teaches us something essential about art and humanity. The greatest gift an artist can give isn't technical perfection or showmanship. It's creating something that helps ordinary people mark the most important moments of their lives. Elvis spent his career worried about whether he was good enough, relevant enough, successful enough, but in those moments watching an elderly couple dance to his song, he finally understood. He had already given people something that would outlast any platinum record or sold-out arena. He'd given them the soundtrack to their love. And in the end, that's the only success that really matters. Not how many people know your name, but how deeply your work touches the lives of people who need it. Robert Carter kept the promise Elvis had made about their 60th anniversary. Even though Elvis couldn't be there in person, Robert played Can't Help Falling in Love at their anniversary party in 1981. And as he and Helen danced, he said, "Elvis is here. He's always been here. Every time we hear this song, every time we hold each other, he's here." That's the real magic of Elvis Presley. His voice didn't just entertain people. It became part of their most sacred moments, their most intimate memories, their most enduring loves. And sometimes, that's the greatest gift one human being can give to another, a soundtrack for the moments that make life worth living. If this story of love, music, and the power of bearing witness moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that simple moments can be sacred. What song is the soundtrack to your love story? Let us know in the comments and ring that notification bell for more powerful stories about the human heart behind music's greatest legends.